It all started when two teachers adopted me. I think that is the reason why I feel parents are a child's first and most influential teachers. In my life, my first teachers were my mommy and poppy. My dad, Poppy, started as a physical education teacher in 1967 and retired in 2007. Now he continues to be a tutor for middle and high school students in the district's alternate program for those who can no longer attend the public schools due to the behavioral problems. My Mommy, started teaching in 1971 and retired in 2010. She worked in the bilingual program as a special education teacher in an elementary and middle school, and then became an assistant principal at an elementary school. She continues to work as a special education teacher for birth to 3. From as far back as I can remember, my favorite part about family dinners was when Mommy and Poppy would talk about their days at work. This is when they would talk about how the day went with their students, how they made them happy, and how they positively influenced the lives of their students each and every day. They also shared funny and sad things that happened, how some kids struggled and how hard it was at times, but could tell that they loved what they did. They say, as the saying goes, brought their work home with them. By doing that, they opened my mind to what teaching really involved. It was more than a book. It was with children and their families. When I was around 9 years old, Mommy asked me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" So many ideas were going through my head. It seemed that every activity that I was involved in, I wanted to teach. Swimming, skating, anything. I really was clueless to what I wanted to be. When I was around 13 years old, I started helping out at the kids' camp at a swim and tennis club where my father worked summers. That summer was the first summer I realized I really enjoyed working with little kids. In junior year of high school, I started volunteering after school at a daycare center in Stamford. I loved the fact that it was the same daycare that I had gone to. While volunteering there, I realized that I enjoyed making the children laugh and playing with them. As soon as I turned 16, I was hired at that daycare center. When people complained about going to work, I didn't understand it because I looked forward to going to work. That's when I realized I could answer Mommy's question of what I wanted to be when I grew up. A teacher. In fact, my volunteering turned into an actual job when I turned 16. I became an assistant teacher at that same daycare. As an assistant teacher, I was given more responsibilities. I was given the opportunity to do art activities, change diapers, care for children, and most of all, create a relationship where they could trust and really get to know me. When high school was over, the next step was college. This is when I decided to apply to Mitchell College for 3 reasons: the education department, a small campus, and far away from home, but not too far. Once I was accepted at Mitchell, I knew right away that my declared major would be early childhood education, and I would be taking my first step in accomplishing my dream of becoming an early childhood education teacher. As part of the early childhood education requirements, I was given the opportunity to have 4 classroom practicums. These practicums included Nathan Hale Arts Magnet School in New London, Connecticut, in a kindergarten classroom, Riverfront Children's Center in Groton, Connecticut, with a daycare, the Friendship School in Waterford, Connecticut, in a preschool/kindergarten classroom, and last but not least, Ballestrini's Child Care and Early Learning Center in Waterford, Connecticut, in a preschool. In each of these placements, I was able to gain more and more knowledge about how lesson plans were taught, how to manage both kindergarten and preschool classrooms, and the amount of work and energy it took to really become a teacher. First official practicum was at Nathan Hale Arts Magnet School in New London, Connecticut, in a kindergarten class. In this particular classroom, I was able to observe how my mentor teacher taught her students, how she interacted with them, what her morning routine was, and how each student was able to learn the material. Most of all, I was able to implement my own lessons that tied into their magnet academic theme, which was STEM: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. For example, my lessons included stacking red cups into sculptures, drawing and writing about a milestone they were able to overcome, and creating and solving math problems using chocolate chip cookies. My second placement was at Riverfront Children's Center in Groton, Connecticut, in a daycare setting. My main focus was to take what I learned in my education classes about the Connecticut Early Learning and Development Standards, also known as the Connecticut ELDS, and apply them to real-life experiences in the classroom. Each of my lessons included reading and discussing a children's book with my students because Riverfront made it a point that literacy was crucial in helping to prepare children to be successful in the classroom. While there, I reread many of my own favorite children's books. I was so lucky to work with a mentor teacher who had an obvious love for children and was willing to support and guide me. My third placement was at the Friendship School in Waterford, Connecticut with preschool students. This particular classroom was able to prepare students for kindergarten by being more structured and rigid with their students and schedules. Every day, they had a certain academic schedule, which resulted in 90% academics and 10% free play. The curriculum for this school focused on literacy, numeracy, inquiry, exploration, and research-based teaching practices. Within my lessons, I had to implement the material that was aligned with my mentor teachers, which was literacy and mathematics. My lessons consisted of categorizing living and non-living objects and creating patterns. Last but not least, my fourth placement was at Ballestrini's Child Care and Early Learning Center in Waterford, Connecticut, in a daycare/school setting. While at Ballestrini's, I learned different classroom management strategies that my mentor teacher used and which ones worked for me. For example, I learned that I could play and have fun with my students, but that they needed to know that ultimately I was still their teacher. I learned many different behavioral strategies from my mentor teacher, such as encouraging personal space while sitting at a table as a group. In our art room, we had a large table that was recycled from an old chalkboard. When doing art activities or playing with Play-Doh, each student had their own physical space. A bubble was drawn where the child sat, along with their initials. Each student was asked 4 questions. 1. Whose bubble is this? 2. Can anyone go inside your bubble? 3. Can you go outside of this bubble and into someone else's bubble? And 4. What happens if this rule is broken? I think that this is a great way to teach children boundaries and personal space. It uses a visual along with a verbal explanation. Another behavioral management strategy I learned about, but didn't get a chance to see in action, would like to try is the use of the magical treasure chest on Fridays. When students were picked up by a parent or guardian, they received a verbal overview of the child's day. If the report was positive, each student would then be able to choose a toy from the magical treasure chest. My last practicum placement was at Ballestrini's Child Care and Early Learning Center. 2 of my favorite lessons I prepared while at Ballestrini's were Dinosaur, and Scarecrows. I decided to do a dinosaur lesson for the letter D because my students had previously learned a lot about dinosaurs and loved to imitate dinosaur sounds. I used their prior knowledge and love of dinosaurs to plan a literacy lesson on the letter D. I introduced the lesson by reading the book Dinosaur by Byron Barton. After reading the book, students were asked to give examples of words that start with the letter D. For the activity, students were given the letter D and the amount of shapes they wanted for each of their dinosaurs' body parts. I think this lesson was successful because students enjoyed making their favorite dinosaurs, which were Tyrannosaurus, Stegosaurus, and Triceratops. Students were able to think outside the box and turn the letter D on the side to make a tall or short dinosaur. They were also given the opportunity to use different shapes for different body parts, so no 2 dinosaurs looked the same.
I was happy with the outcome of this lesson because students were productively engaged in a concept they enjoyed learning about and creating. Another lesson I enjoyed doing with students was my scarecrow lesson. This lesson tied into the fall unit that was being taught in the classroom. I introduced my lesson by reading the book Big Red Barn, written by Margaret Wise Brown and illustrated by Felicia Bond. After reading the book, I showed them real-life pictures of scarecrows that were on my porch at home, along with a picture of the Mitchell College barn to link them with the pictures in the book. Before we began our activities, students were asked to give examples of where they might see a scarecrow and what they think a scarecrow does. Students shared that they had seen a scarecrow when pumpkin picking with their families, or the fact that they saw a pumpkin head scarecrow while apple picking on our school field trip to Scott's Yankee Farmer in East Lyme, Connecticut. The art activity consisted of them making their own scarecrows. Each student received an outline of a shirt with the head of a scarecrow, 3 color options of construction paper, and strips of construction paper that had already been ripped. They could use these options for the hair and shirt. I think by giving them choices, they were able to create their own original scarecrow. They seemed to be happy being in control of their choices and not being told to make their scarecrow a certain way. I also think that they made a connection between the book that we read, the art activity, and the scarecrows they saw in the community. Part of my practicum assignment required I choose a focus child. I asked my mentor teacher for assistance, and she suggested Vivian. The reason being that Vivian wasn't interacting with peers, not participating in class, not as attentive as much as she would like her to be, and she was very quiet. My main focus for Vivian was to increase her positive interaction with friends, gain confidence in her participation in the classroom, have her use more language, and have her nap during nap time. In order to support Vivian with interaction with her peers, I started playing with her. I invited other peers to join in our play. With time, I noticed she became more comfortable and didn't need me as much. I also targeted the clarity of her language. I first noticed her words would run into each other when speaking to friends or teachers. When this would happen, I would ask her to repeat what she said. I would make sure to wait and not pressure her if I noticed that she was uncomfortable. I also at times would repeat what I thought she said, or I would model what I thought she said. If what I said wasn't correct, she would say no, and repeat what she had said in the first place. My main goal was for her to not get frustrated. In order to increase Vivian's participation in class, I would sit with her, personally ask her the question, and give her different options as answers if needed. She is now beginning to answer questions during whole group activities on her own. As for her attentiveness, I tried different strategies such as sitting behind her, tapping her shoulder, whispering her name, and doing the hand-over-hand technique for our sing-along songs. The theorist that has influenced my thinking about learning and teaching is Howard Gardner. Howard Gardner said, "We used to think that we could give everyone a test to measure their intelligence and then use the score to see which people were smarter. And it doesn't work because there are many different kinds of smart." Gardner, 1991. In the article, Multiple Intelligences, published by techweb.org, Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences is reviewed, including visual spatial, which refers to people who like to draw, do puzzles, read maps, and are very aware of their environments. Teaching tools would include utilizing graphs, charts, photographs, or videos. Then we have musical, which refers to people who love music and can study with music in the background. Teaching tools would be instruments, multimedia, and radio. Third is intrapersonal. This refers to people who tune into their inner feelings and feel strong, confident, motivated, and are the most independent of learners. Teaching tools would be independent study and the use of books. Next is linguistic. This refers to people who have good auditory skills, who like to read and play word games. Tools include computers, lectures, and books. Next is logical mathematical. This refers to people who can think abstractly. They enjoy experiments, solving problems, and mysteries. Next is bodily kinesthetic. This refers to people who use their bodies, such as dancers or surgeons. They learn through physical activity, hands-on learning, acting out, and role-playing. Last but not least, we have interpersonal. This refers to people who understand and interact with others. They have many friends and have empathy for others along with street smarts. They can be taught through group activities, seminars, and dialogues. Tools include the telephone, audio conferencing, time and attention from the instructor, video conferencing, writing, and computer conferencing. In each of my placements, I have seen some examples of the multiple intelligences, including musical. For example, Vivian loves to sing and dance around and participate in our sing-alongs during morning meeting. As for Anthony, another student who attends Balestrinis, he learns through thinking mathematically because his mind works in an abstract way, and he enjoys experiments, solving problems, and mysteries. As for my focus child last year, he was intrapersonal. This meant that he had strong feelings, felt confident, motivated, and always wanted to be independent. I strongly believe that if I'm going to be a good teacher, I must learn how to use the different multiple intelligences to the children of my classroom and learn to integrate them into my teaching. My favorite quote of all time comes from the book, The Little Engine That Could. The quote is, "I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I know I can, I knew I could." Little Engine has always been my inspiration because as a student who has attention deficit disorder, also known as ADD, motivation is key. For example, if I ever doubted myself, I would think about the role she has played in my life, visualize success, and not listen to anyone who was trying to put me down. When Little Blue Engine reached the top of the mountain and succeeded in her job, she said to herself, "I knew I could." All in all, just like Little Blue Engine, I always needed to work hard in order to get to where I wanted to go, with the help and support of others cheering me on. My plans after college include looking and applying for jobs and becoming a teacher in a preschool, daycare, or kindergarten setting. All I want is to be in a teaching position where I can put everything I have learned in the preschool program to my own real-life experiences. I have realized through my practicum experiences that I truly love working with children and that teaching is my dream. I would like to thank Mommy and Poppy for adopting me, pushing me to do better, and loving me unconditionally. Professor Phillips for being my first early childhood education professor. Professor Mansfield for making this placement possible. Professor Salmon for taking the time to observe my lesson plans. Miss Andrea for inviting me to Balestrinis as a student from Mitchell College. Miss Joy for being my mentor teacher. Jill Castagnata for being my second pair of eyes for this project. Janice Arscott for supporting me since day one of college. Tori Chaco for being an awesome study buddy. Casey Russell for sending me your video from last year as an outline. Ashley Bonagera for helping me with this project. Claire Murphy for being a friend who listens, isn't judgmental, and always makes me laugh. Emily Smith for being there for me no matter what. Vivian for being my focus child. Thank you all for your support, understanding, and help. You were always there for me when I needed a second pair of eyes, reassurance, and ideas.